Hello and welcome to Media Snack Meets, this time with Mike Cooper.
Hello, I'm Mike Cooper from PhD Worldwide, based here in London. We have a network of 90 offices and around about 6,000 people.
Good. Now, the reason that we invited you to come onto Media Snack Meets is that PhD, as a media agency, there's lots of talk about the challenges facing media agencies from different quarters, but PhD seems to be having a pretty good year so far. So we thought it'd be interesting to learn a bit more about what's going on. Why are you winning loads of new business, loads of awards? Describe your year so far.
No, we've had a very good year so far this year. I mean, we were the most awarded media agency at Cannes. We won 6 Lions at Cannes, more than any other network, I think. Obviously, the HSBC win was pivotal for us. Last year, we started working with Volkswagen Group, which was the biggest media consolidation ever, which has been a big piece of business to digest. So yeah, we've had a lot of momentum. I think, as with all these things, I mean, you see something happening now, but an awful lot of preparation work goes into that, and we've been kind of like building up and adding resources and hiring aggressively and adding new talent over the last 5 or 6 years to sort of build up to.
And why has this all come? I mean, do you see it as a kind of as a moment where these things have come together? Because I mean, you've been running the PhD for quite a while, so you've obviously had a master plan. It seems like. Is this the most successful point, do you think, in that growth?
I think we've had a lot of momentum over the years in terms of new business, and we have consistently, over the last 6 or 7 years, we've performed very well in terms of awards. I mean, we're consistently up at a very high level. We're the second most awarded media network in terms of the Gunn Report, and we only rank number 8 worldwide, so we punch above our weight in terms of awards. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, first of all, we are a strategic planning focused media agency. Secondly, we have a system called Source, which is a live collaboration engine, which works very, very effectively and generates something like about 500 ideas a week on average for clients. Right. So there's a huge amount of innovation and collaboration.
Publicists seem to be following you into that route. We'll come to that.
Yeah.
Let me pick you up on HSBC is the recent one.
Yes.
I was obviously delighted to hear. In your interviews following that pitch, you were saying that it was one of the best pitches that you'd done, which we were pleased. Obviously, we ran the review. There's some negative noise around pitches, that they're getting kind of laborious, or they're not clear and they're draining agency resources. What was it about HSBC that you said? I think it was enjoyable. I was delighted to hear that was the word that you used.
Well, I actually do believe that any pitch you should try and make an enjoyable experience.
We try.
And I think if in the early stages of being briefed by a client, you pick up signals that it's going to be a negative process, then you've got to think very carefully about whether you're going to proceed or not. But HSBC, I think Leanne Cutts, the Chief Marketing Officer of HSBC, set the tone really with it, and it was a very positive, optimistic process. And as you know, they had a code word for it, Project Sunshine. And they did the briefing, I don't know if this was your idea or HSBC's idea, but at the Museum of Brands in Notting Hill, which we thought was just very cool, very imaginative. And I think more than anything else, the clients made themselves very, very accessible through that whole process. I mean, I was quite surprised. We had quite a lot of time to mingle and have coffees before the briefing took place at the Museum of Brands. And the clients were all there. They were all very anxious and open to sort of like talk. And, quite often, you're not allowed to have access to a client during a kind of a pitch process. It's a very kind of like closed, sterile, dark process in a way, but it wasn't like that at all. And I think Leanne at the briefing stood up and said that she wanted it to be a very positive experience for them and for all the participants. And that is, I have to say, that's quite unusual. It's quite, and I just thought the way they went about it was very imaginative, very open, very positive. So yeah, we did enjoy doing the pitches.
Good.
We really did. Yeah.
And why the success in that? I mean, you mentioned VW. That was last year. That was a massive win. At the time, everyone was saying, how can PhD be able to run a piece of business at that scale? Like, how do you land that? And now HSBC, another big win. What have you had to do to compete now at that slightly higher level? You're competing head to head against some of the kind of big networks.
I think one of the things that really helps us is that having a history of communications planning and being strategic is that we have more resource in that area than any other media network by a considerable margin. So I'll give you an example. For example, on the Volkswagen pitch, we had an experience. We had a part of the process took place in Berlin, and we had to do a central credentials presentation, and then we had to divide up into 7 groups, 7 separate presentations, all separate strategy presentations for each of the Volkswagen Group brands. Now, separate, simultaneous, strategic-based presentations for each one of the brands. Now, that's a very challenging process. And actually, I won't say it was a walk in the park for us, because it absolutely wasn't, but it wasn't impossible for us because we had so much resource that we could allocate it across those teams, and we could digest a process like that without it being, too sort of difficult. So I think having that kind of like firepower in terms of strategic ability is very, very important.
Yeah. Do you think, does it represent, I mean, on MediaSnack, David and I have talked a lot over the years about, or in recent years, is that the brief, the media brief is changing a little bit. And there's been less focus since previous years on media as a commodity and a cost, and that you win pitches by being the biggest and the cheapest. And that maybe the brief is shifting back to the marketer, and the KPIs are all about effectiveness and outcome and a bit more strategic. Are you observing that? Do you think that's a reason why, as a planning-driven agency?
I mean, a pure environment where it was just all about scale and price doesn't really play to our strengths. I mean, obviously we're part of a much wider organisation with Omnicom Media Group, and we can produce very competitive kind of like pricing and all the kind of like the rest of it. But I do think the market has definitely changed in the last few years, and if you think about it, media has just become so much more complicated, so much more fluid. I mean, there are different developments in media on a weekly basis, and I think keeping up with those kind of changes and making sure that you can get transformative return on investment in that kind of environment is just more and more challenging, and that plays to a more strategic approach to media. You still have to do all the other things as well. You still have to be brilliant at the basics of media. You still have to provide outstanding value. But I do think you're right. The game has moved towards more of a strategic play.
Good. Well, I mean, hopefully that means for you that you're in the right place at the right time as that shifts. I saw you in Cannes. This is only a few weeks ago. Our observation, we were talking about this last week, is that it was just very different. How was your week?
I thought it was much, much better, to be quite honest. I thought it was more intimate. I thought there was more focus on what Cannes is supposed to be about, which is creativity. And I thought it was just easier to get work done and to see people and to, have a kind of positive, enjoyable experience at Cannes. And I felt that the work was there was a much greater focus on the work, quite honestly. I think in the past few years, Cannes had just become so large and so big that, I mean, it was, is it a festival of technology? Is it a festival of consultancy? I mean, what is, and I felt this year it really got back to its roots, and it was so much better for that, quite honestly. So I was really pleased with the changes.
Good. Year. I think we had the same kind of observation. It's just it seemed like stuff was getting done. People were actually having some clarity of talking. When we talked about Cannes in last week's episode, we'd referenced a quote from the CEO of Essential, who kind of seemed to be making it quite clear that it was, and perhaps correctly, going back to its roots of creativity, and said that if they want any focus at all, it's from creative agencies and less media agencies and less media people. Do you think that's fair? And if so, where do we go if we're not welcome on the Croisette?
I haven't seen that quote, but I mean, I do think that media is such a increasingly large part of the whole kind of marketing services pie, and certainly for us as PhD, creativity in media thinking and execution is incredibly important. So.
So you're a legitimate part of that debate.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a major category at Cannes for media lions, and I think that will continue. So I'm not sure what. Presumably that was Duncan Painter. I don't know. I haven't seen that quote, but I'm sure he didn't mean that there should be less creativity in media.
Okay, good.
I'm fairly confident.
I probably agree with you. I was just worried that maybe we're not as welcome. One of the other things we were doing. David and I ran this kind of workshop, or we were part of this workshop with the Young Lions, which is a fabulous initiative, getting people under the age of 30 kind of really, brought to Cannes as delegates, and they kind of work together, etc. And we talked about that before. They asked such good questions. One of the questions that they asked, and a lot of these people are young people working in media agencies in different parts of the world. They're the smartest in their country or their agency, and they're naturally quite entrepreneurial, and they really want to engage with supporting the growth of the agencies that they work in. One of the questions that came out, which we thought was fantastic, was about which is something which echoes what we hear from marketers a lot, which is media agencies, they all look and sound the same. They're all a bit kind of vanilla, and it's hard to differentiate. And the question was, do you need to differentiate a media agency? And how should you do that? So in a pitch or in a CRIDS presentation, how do you stand out? Now, to some extent, PhD has been quite successful, I think, in differentiating at a time where media agencies have been quite homogenous. Is that are you really conscious of that? Is that something that you work on?
Absolutely, we work very, very hard at it. I mean, we're on the main stage at Cannes every year with the Thought Leader piece. We invest a lot of time and effort, and we've taken some outstanding speakers to Cannes. This year we teamed up with the School of Life. In the past we've had Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, join us on stage. We've had gamification experts. I mean, the idea is to help reinforce the differentiation of our positioning. Being more strategic and more thought leadership based. I think it's very, very dangerous if your business starts getting commoditized. Very, very dangerous indeed. And I must admit, I do worry a little bit for the young people in our business, because I think some media agencies have started to look like call centers in recent years, and just the idea of them being in front of a screen sort of like 8-10 hours a day or whatever. At the end of the day, they work in advertising, and they've got to feel that they're part of something which is broader and more exciting and more kind of like interesting. So if the business does get commoditized and people do feel that they're just, their prospects are sitting in front of a screen for the rest of their lives and not engaging with clients or getting opportunities to do great creative work or going to Cannes or all the kind of wonderful things that there are available in this business, then we're really letting them down. Yeah,
good. Yeah. Okay, I agree with that. We're trying to run a battery farm here,
But no, just to finish on that, I do think if you end up with a sea of sameness across media agencies, that's very, very dangerous. Yeah. And yes, we do have we're very lucky at PhD because we have a planning-based heritage that goes right the way back to 1990 when the business was founded. Yeah. Yes, we have built on that positioning, and we've tried to globalize that positioning as well, which isn't always kind of like easy, but I think it has worked out for us reasonably well.
Yeah. Good. What you've touched on this a couple of times now, and something I wanted to pick up on, because one of the things that's somewhat Cannes related was Publicis Groupe. Last year, Arthur announced that they were going to scale back on their investments in Cannes and other awards because they wanted to invest in this kind of technology platform or AI solution, which they end up being called Marcel. And he was at Cannes this year, releasing, giving the update 12 months later. So it's this kind of operating system for the agency. When they were talking about it last year, I was thinking, that sounds a little bit like PhD Source, maybe. And then you wrote last week, comparing the two, but also very encouraging of Publicis to use technology. So we've been impressed seeing Source through some of the projects, and your team have shared that with us. Can you just explain what it is? Because it's been running quite 5-6 years.
Well, Source is a live collaboration engine. I mean, it means that all our employees are linked up on Source, and it is a gamified collaboration engine. And I would just say that what was very interesting, I mean, I did go to the Marcel presentation because I was kind of like fascinated as to what they were doing and how different it was to Source, and what other sort of aspects there were to it. I mean, I would just say it is extremely challenging creating a global collaboration engine. And you've got to really think about ways in which you're going to encourage people to participate in it.
Yeah.
And that's why we gamified Source. So we have, literally live leaderboards for countries as well as individuals. Countries get ridiculously competitive with each other.
Yeah.
For some reason, England and Australia or the UK, I should say, and Australia get ridiculously competitive with each other. But you also get kind of like, Sweden declaring war on Germany and trying to kind of like rise above them. It's done in a very kind of like positive way, but it also enables you to learn the skills of your different employees, and if you're recruiting for somebody in Dubai or somewhere and you need someone who's a collaborator or originator of ideas, you can kind of like profile people, so kind of like what a particular person's skills are. But I would just say we've been on a journey with Source over the last 6 to 7 years, and building it, creating it, ensuring that people use it and get the most out of it is a tremendously challenging process. So I would just say I think Publicis are on the right path with Marcel, but I wouldn't underestimate the kind of investment in time and money that you need to make to get one of these things to function really, really well and to work properly, because we've invested a huge amount of time in planning Source, in training on Source, and ensuring that people kind of like really use it. And I have to say that the big moment of change for us with Source was when we launched the mobile version of Source, which meant that people could use it when they were commuting, if they're waiting for a friend in a bar, wherever it happens to be. And we just found the numbers absolutely soared once we did that. So which isn't a kind of great surprise when you think about how powerful mobile is as a medium in media. But
have you got do you think other agencies are going to come out with this?
Maybe they will. Maybe they will. I mean,
people come to you and say, "Tell us how you did it."
We have had people come and ask us how we did it. I think when they start to understand the complexities and the layers of Source, some of them have sort of shied away from doing it. But I would encourage people to pursue that line of attack. I mean, we're very fortunate at PhD in having Mark Holden, who's champion Source. It was his kind of like idea, and a whole team of people around him that have really helped to kind of build it and create it and nurture it. I just wouldn't underestimate what's involved in really getting a network to use something like that. And I mean, the one piece of advice I would give Publicis is that you need to think about how you're going to encourage people to go in there every day, day in, day out, to use it.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll see hopefully the gamification of a planning system more and more increasingly in agencies. Finally, well, one thing I wanted to ask you. I mean, how long have you been running PhD now?
11 years.
11 years. Okay, so. We hear it's harder and harder to run a media agency. I mean, the business has become kind of tricky. It's always been a good challenge, but a fun challenge. But we hear from others that are leading agencies that it's difficult, particularly in the kind of group environment. How have you been successful in doing that? And what does it take to be a leader or CEO of a media agency now, particularly one in a group where sometimes it might feel like team orders and you're towing the line and maybe you don't feel like you've got the freedom to experiment and run the agency that you're in charge of?
I think first of all, this business is about talent, and it's all about the people that you surround yourselves with. And if you can invest in getting the best talent, the greatest talent, then life becomes an awful lot easier, and it also becomes more interesting, and it becomes kind of like more fun if you're working with great people. And I wouldn't just say at PhD. I mean, my previous role was running Omnicom Media Group in Asia Pacific, and we had to build that network from scratch. And the philosophy always was, whenever we opened up in a new market, whether it was China or Australia or India or wherever it happened to be, try and get the best person in that market, because they will attract other terrific people, and you will start to build something which is kind of like compelling and highly competitive. So I would sort of say, if you surround yourself with the very, very best people and you create an environment where they feel supported, encouraged, it's not political, they're not going to kind of get thrown out or stabbed in the back for kind of like making a bad decision. If you can create that kind of environment, then great things happen. I think that's been a sort of like a part of our success. Secondly, I would say that with PhD, whenever we gone to Omnicom and made the case for investment in PhD, to hire talent or to invest in a system like Source, which was not cheap, by the way. They've always been very, very supportive, but you have to put your balls on the line to a certain extent, and make the case for investment. And obviously, there is a risk to kind of like doing that. I do think I think it's an enormous privilege to run any kind of company in an advertising or marketing services environment, because you are given the space to do things. And if you feel you're not being given the space to do things, create that space. I also do feel with PhD, we have had a lot of momentum over the years. We're a challenger brand. Having a bit of an attitude and being a challenger brand, taking share from bigger competitors, is always a kind of like a fun and interesting place to be. You've got to create your kind of like your energy base as a network, and you've got to kind of like think about that positioning. So if you're running a network and you haven't thought about your positioning in relation to competitors, you're in a bit of a hiding to nothing, quite honestly.
Yeah, good. Well, Congratulations so far. The master plan seems to be coming together. That's all for MediaStack Meets this time. Mike, thank you for your time.
Very good to see you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.